My name is Nora Bennett, and I was 32 years old when I realized that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the first ones to break your heart. It happened on a cold Saturday in October. My grandmother Evelyn was turning 80. Most people celebrate 80 surrounded by family. My grandmother spent hers waiting. I got off work around 5 that afternoon and started the 3-hour drive to her house in Oak Ridge. I remember stopping at a grocery store on the way and buying flowers and a birthday card. I wish I had bought something bigger. I wish I had known what I was about to walk into. When I opened her front door, the first thing I noticed was the silence. The second thing was the dining room table. 8 place settings. 8 plates. 8 glasses. 8 folded napkins. Every seat waiting for someone. Nobody was there. The birthday cake sat untouched in the middle of the table. Vanilla buttercream. Pink frosting flowers. Her specialty. The candles had burned down into puddles of wax. The ice cream was melting. And my grandmother was sitting alone, just staring at the empty chairs. For a second I couldn't move. My chest felt tight, like somebody had squeezed all the air out of me. Then she looked up. "Nora." I forced a smile. "Hey, Grandma." Her face lit up instantly, the way it always did, like I was still 10 years old. She looked around the room, then frowned. "Oh goodness. What?" She looked confused. Was somebody supposed to come today? That question hit me harder than anything else. Because for one brief moment she remembered enough to know something was missing. "It was your birthday, Grandma." Her eyes widened, then slowly filled with sadness. "Oh? Just one word. But I'll never forget it." Because buried inside that one little word was disappointment, heartbreak, and understanding. Then the moment passed. The confusion returned. And she smiled again. "Well, good thing you're here." I almost cried right there. Instead, I hugged her. We ate birthday cake together. Just the two of us. No family photos. No party. No gifts. Just cake and stories. Honestly, it ended up being one of the best nights we'd had together in years. She told me about meeting Grandpa at a roadside diner. About buying the house in 1971. About planting the hydrangeas outside. Stories I'd heard 100 times. Stories I suddenly never wanted to stop hearing. Around 10 that night, I helped her upstairs. She felt smaller than I remembered. Fragile. Like time had been stealing pieces of her while I wasn't looking. When I tucked her into bed, she grabbed my wrist. Hard. Her eyes became clear. Really clear. Clearer than they'd been all day. "Nora. I'm here." She squeezed tighter. "They think I don't know." A chill ran through me. "Who?" Her lips parted, like she was about to tell me something important. Something she'd been carrying around for a long time. But before the words came out, her eyes closed. Seconds later she was asleep. I stood beside her bed staring down at her. Something wasn't right. I could feel it. The next morning, I started cleaning up the remains of the birthday party that never happened. The cake. The plates. The decorations. I was carrying trash toward the front door when somebody knocked. 2 strangers stood on the porch. A woman in a gray coat. A man carrying a briefcase. Neither looked familiar. The woman studied me carefully. "Are you Nora Bennett?" "Yeah." She nodded, then handed me a thick manila folder sealed shut, with a signature across the flap. My grandmother's signature. My stomach dropped. What is this? The woman exchanged a glance with her colleague. Then she said something that changed my life forever. Your grandmother asked us to give this to you when the time came. I stared at the folder. The time for what? The woman looked toward the house, then back at me. And her next words sent ice through my veins. To stop them before it's too late. And standing there on that porch, holding a folder that suddenly felt heavier than a brick, I had no idea my family was already planning to sell the one thing my grandmother loved most. The folder sat on the kitchen table for almost 10 minutes before I opened it. I just stared at it. My grandmother's signature stretched across the seal. Neat, confident, deliberate. Not the shaky handwriting she'd started developing recently. This signature belonged to the grandmother I remembered. The grandmother who balanced checkbooks without calculators. The grandmother who never forgot a birthday. The grandmother who saw problems coming before anyone else. Finally, I broke the seal. Inside were dozens of documents. Legal documents. Property records. Medical evaluations. Trust agreements. And right on top sat a handwritten note. My heart started pounding. I unfolded it carefully. Nora, if you're reading this, things happened exactly the way I was afraid they would. Please don't let them take my home. Everything you need is inside this folder. I love you. Grandma. I read it 3 times. Then a 4th. Don't let them take my home. Who? Why? I started going through the documents. Most of it looked like legal paperwork. Then I found something that stopped me cold. A trust agreement. The house wasn't in Grandma's name anymore. It hadn't been for over a year. The property had been transferred into a family trust. Long before her memory started declining. Long before anyone realized how serious things were becoming. She had planned ahead. Every single detail. My phone buzzed. Mom? Of course. The timing was too perfect. I answered. Hello. Oh good, she said immediately. Good what? I heard some people stopped by the house. My stomach tightened. How did she know that? I hadn't told anybody. Not one person. Who told you that? A pause. Tiny. But noticeable. I just heard. Lie? I knew it. She knew it. Neither of us acknowledged it. Then her tone changed. Nora, if anybody gives you paperwork, don't sign anything. Now every alarm bell in my head was ringing. Why? Because your grandmother isn't capable of making financial decisions anymore. There it was. Money. Not concern. Not her health. Not her birthday. Money. I looked down at the documents. Something felt very wrong. Mom, is somebody trying to sell Grandma's house? Silence. Long silence. Too long. Then came the fake laugh. Oh sweetheart, we are just exploring options. I hated that phrase. People only say exploring options when they don't want to admit what they are actually doing. What options? Aaron has been helping us. Aaron. My brother. The guy who missed Grandma's birthday. The guy who always had a business deal running. The guy who somehow managed to turn every family problem into a financial discussion. Suddenly I wasn't surprised anymore. I was angry. Very angry. After I hung up, I found a business card clipped inside the folder. Rachel Whitmore. Elder law attorney. On the back, Grandma had written 3 words. Call her immediately. The handwriting looked rushed, urgent, like she knew time was running out. I looked toward the living room. Grandma was asleep in her recliner, completely unaware of the storm gathering around her. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Aaron. I ignored it. A minute later he called again. Ignored. Then came a text. We need to talk. No. We really didn't. Not yet. Because whatever was happening, I finally understood one thing. This wasn't about helping Grandma. Somebody wanted something. And whatever it was, Grandma had seen it coming long before I did. The next morning, I would drive 3 hours to meet the lawyer she trusted most. What I learned there would completely change the way I saw my family forever. The next morning, I drove to Hartford. 3 hours. 3 hours of questions. 3 hours of replaying every conversation I'd had with my mother and brother over the last year. 3 hours wondering what my grandmother had been so afraid of. Rachel Whitmore's office sat inside an old brick building downtown. Nothing flashy. Nothing impressive. Just a small brass plaque on the door. Exactly the kind of place my grandmother would trust. Rachel greeted me personally. The second I sat down, she looked at the folder and sighed. You opened it? Yeah. And you read the note? I nodded. About 20 times. That earned a small smile. That sounds about right. Then she became serious. Very serious. Nora, your grandmother came to me 14 months ago. The date matched the paperwork. She came alone. No family. Rachel shook her head. None? What did she want? Rachel leaned forward. Protection. The word hung in the room. Protection from what? She looked me directly in the eyes. Her family. I felt like somebody punched me. No. I'm sorry. I sat back, trying to process what I was hearing. Rachel opened a thick file. Your grandmother had recently received an early dementia diagnosis. My stomach dropped. I knew she was forgetting things. But hearing it spoken out loud hurt. Rachel continued. She wasn't afraid of the diagnosis. What was she afraid of? Rachel looked down at her notes. Then read directly from them. The day they stop seeing me as a person and start seeing me as a problem, they'll come after the house. The room went quiet. Because that sounded exactly like Grandma. Practical. Smart. Honest. And judging by what I'd already discovered, completely right. Rachel slid several documents across the desk. Every document in that folder was signed while your grandmother was fully competent. I studied the papers. The trust. The medical evaluations. The property transfer. Everything. She wanted to make sure nobody could force her out. I swallowed. And she chose me. Rachel smiled softly. Actually, she was very specific. She handed me another page. A written statement signed by Grandma. I started reading. My granddaughter Nora Bennett is the only person in this family who loves this house for what it means instead of what it's worth. My eyes instantly filled with tears. I looked away. Rachel quietly slid a box of tissues across the desk. I laughed despite myself. She really wrote that. Every word. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then Rachel's expression changed. There is something else. My stomach tightened. What? 6 months ago, your brother contacted a real estate agent. I froze. Aaron. Of course. He requested a valuation on your grandmother's property. The room suddenly felt smaller. Rachel handed me another document. Estimated market value: $720,000. I stared at the number, then stared at it again. Everything clicked. The sudden concern, the pressure, the conversations, the excuses, the urgency. It wasn't about helping Grandma. It was about $720,000. Rachel folded her hands. Nora, I don't think your family plans to ask permission. I slowly looked up. What are they planning? Her answer came immediately. They may already be trying to sell the house. And at that exact moment, I realized something terrifying. The fight for my grandmother's home hadn't just started. I was already late. Because somewhere, while Grandma sat alone waiting for family on her birthday, people had already started making plans for the day she wouldn't be able to stop them. I barely remember the drive home from Hartford. The whole way back, one thought kept repeating in my head. They were already trying to sell Grandma's house. Not thinking about it. Not discussing it. Not considering it. Trying. Actively. And the worst part, Grandma had known. By the time I pulled into her driveway, the sun was setting behind the trees. The old white house looked exactly the same. The porch swing. The flower beds. The blue hydrangeas lining the walkway. Everything looked peaceful. But now I couldn't stop wondering how many people were looking at it and seeing a paycheck instead of a home. When I walked inside, Grandma was sitting in her recliner watching an old game show. Her face lit up immediately. There you are. 3 simple words. But they nearly broke me. Because there was no hidden motive behind them. No agenda. No calculation. Just love. I sat beside her and hugged her tighter than usual. You okay, sweetheart? She asked. Yeah. Lie? She knew it. She always knew. For a moment, she stared toward the kitchen. Then she said something that sent chills down my spine. The house. I froze. What about it? Her eyes stayed fixed on the doorway. They want the house. My pulse jumped. For a few seconds, she sounded completely clear. Like the fog had lifted. Like the old Grandma was right there. Who wants the house? She frowned, trying to hold on to the thought. The people. What people? They come when the nurse is here. Every muscle in my body tightened. They walk through the rooms. I sat forward. What people are walking through the rooms? But the moment vanished. Just like that. The confusion returned. What were we talking about? She asked. I forced a smile. Nothing important. But it was important. Very important. That night, after Grandma went to bed, I searched the house. Every drawer. Every cabinet. Every shelf. For 2 hours I found nothing. Then I opened a hallway cabinet packed with old magazines. And there it was. A property listing sheet. My stomach dropped. The address was Grandma's. The photos were Grandma's. The description was Grandma's house. 4 bedrooms. 2 baths. Corner lot. Updated kitchen. Asking price, $675,000. I stared at it. Then read it again. This wasn't research. This wasn't planning. This was a listing. An actual listing. Somebody was trying to sell the house. Right now. Without her permission. Without legal authority. Without telling her. Attached to the listing was a partially completed purchase agreement. The buyer's information was already filled in. The proposed closing date had already been selected. An underseller representative. Aaron Bennett. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because I couldn't believe the nerve. My brother had literally appointed himself as the person selling a house he didn't own. I took pictures of every document. Every page. Every signature. Every note. Then I sent them all to Rachel. 10 minutes later my phone rang. Nora. Her voice sounded furious. What do we do? There was a brief pause. Then Rachel answered. We stopped the sale. How? Because your brother made one very big mistake. I looked down at the paperwork. What mistake? Rachel didn't hesitate. He forgot your grandmother saw this coming before anyone else did. For the first time since opening that folder, I felt something besides fear. Hope. Because somewhere ahead, a fight was coming. And thanks to Grandma, we might actually be ready for it. What I didn't know was that Aaron was about to show up in person, and finally reveal why he wanted the house so badly. The next morning, I woke up angry. Not scared. Not confused. Angry. And honestly, it felt better. Because anger gave me something to focus on. I sat at Grandma's kitchen table reviewing the documents again when Rachel called. I found something. Immediately my stomach tightened. The buyer. Yeah. Rachel sounded irritated. Which usually meant bad news. The company making the offer isn't a family buyer. I figured. It's worse than that. I sat up straighter. The company specializes in buying properties below market value. That got my attention. Rachel continued. They target distressed sales, estates, and elderly homeowners. I looked at the offer price. $675,000. The valuation showed $720,000. Maybe more. They were already getting a bargain. Then Rachel dropped the real bomb. The company has done business with Aaron before. I froze. What? They've purchased 2 development properties from him within the last year. Suddenly everything clicked. This wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. Aaron knew these people. This deal had been arranged. After hanging up, I spent the afternoon helping Grandma around the house. Laundry. Watering plants. Watching TV. Normal things. The kind of things families should do. Around 3 o'clock, somebody knocked on the door. I opened it. Aaron. Of course. He stood there wearing expensive sunglasses and a smile I immediately distrusted. Hey, sis. What do you want? His smile faded slightly. Can I come in? I stepped aside. Grandma was thrilled to see him. For a moment, I almost believed he felt guilty. Then I noticed something. He wasn't looking at Grandma. He was looking at the house. The windows. The walls. The kitchen. The floors. Like somebody inspecting property. Not visiting family. After a few minutes, he pulled me aside. We need to talk. No. Nora. No. His jaw tightened. Stop being difficult. That made me laugh. You're trying to sell Grandma's house. His face hardened. There it is. There what is? The version of the story you've decided to believe. I stared at him. My version. Aaron sighed dramatically. My company is struggling. I said nothing. I've got projects tied up. Nothing. People depend on me. Still nothing. Finally he snapped. Would you say something? I looked toward the living room where Grandma sat smiling at the television. Then back at him. No. His expression darkened. You don't understand. Then explain it. For a second, he looked exhausted. Really exhausted. Then the truth finally slipped out. I owe money. How much? Silence. Then. A lot. I wasn't impressed. How much, Aaron? He rubbed his face. Then finally admitted it. More than 700,000. Even though I already suspected it, hearing it out loud hit differently. The pressure. The desperation. The rushed sale. Now it all made sense. Aaron looked at me. I can save everything. By selling Grandma's house. I can fix this. No. His eyes narrowed. You think you're helping her? I am helping her. He laughed bitterly. No, Nora. You're destroying this family. Then he pointed toward the living room. And said something I'll never forgive. She won't even remember this house in 6 months. The room went silent. Because some lines should never be crossed. And Aaron had just crossed one. When he left a few minutes later, I stood at the front door watching his car disappear. My brother wasn't worried anymore. He was desperate. And desperate people don't stop when things get hard. They get dangerous. That night, I found paperwork hidden inside the house that proved Aaron and Mom had already convinced Grandma to sign something she never should have signed. Aaron's words stayed with me all night. She won't even remember this house. Every time I thought about it, I got angrier. The next morning, Rachel called. Nora, I think they had your grandmother sign additional paperwork. My stomach dropped. What kind of paperwork? I don't know yet. That answer scared me. Because Rachel usually knew everything. After we hung up, I started searching again. This time I wasn't looking for listings. I was looking for signatures. Hours passed. Nothing. Then I found an accordion file hidden behind old photo albums in the guest room closet. My pulse jumped. Inside were medical records, insurance papers, bank documents, and buried in the middle was exactly what Rachel feared. A power of attorney. Dated 6 weeks earlier. I stared at it. Then read it again. According to the document, Grandma had appointed Dad as her legal representative, giving him authority over finances, property, assets, everything. No way. My hands started shaking. Because Rachel had already shown me the original paperwork. Grandma chose me. Not Dad. Me. Then I looked at the signature. And my heart sank. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Grandma's signature used to be beautiful. Smooth. Confident. Strong. This one looked shaky. Uneven. Broken. I pulled out one of her older documents. Then placed them side by side. The difference was obvious. Painfully obvious. One signature belonged to the woman who taught me cursive. The other belonged to somebody confused. Somebody vulnerable. Somebody who didn't fully understand what she was signing. I checked the date again. 6 weeks earlier. The same week Grandma had fallen. The same week she'd been hospitalized. The same week her confusion became noticeably worse. I called Rachel immediately. After hearing everything, she sighed. That's what I was afraid of. What does it mean? It means we may have proof. Proof of what? Rachel didn't hesitate. Elder exploitation. The words hit me like a truck. Because suddenly this wasn't family drama anymore. This was serious. Very serious. That evening, Dad showed up unexpectedly. For the first time in weeks. The second I saw him, I knew something was wrong. He looked exhausted. Like he hadn't slept. Like he'd been carrying guilt around for a long time. He sat at Grandma's kitchen table. The old maple table. The table she'd spent her life protecting. For a long time neither of us spoke. Then Dad quietly said something I never expected. "I think we made a mistake." I froze. "What?" His eyes stayed on the table. "Aaron's in trouble." "I know." "No." His voice cracked. "You don't know how bad." I sat down. "Tell me." Dad swallowed. Then gave me a number that made my stomach drop. Over $800,000. I stared at him. "No." He nodded. I wish I was kidding. Suddenly everything made sense. The rush. The pressure. The threats. The lies. It wasn't about helping Grandma. It wasn't even about saving the company anymore. It was about survival. Then Dad looked directly at me. And what he said next scared me more than anything else. "Nora, your mother already scheduled the closing." The room went silent. "The closing?" Dad nodded. "It happens in 10 days. 10 days. That was all we had. 10 days before they tried to sell Grandma's house. 10 days before everything came to a head. 10 days before the truth would finally be forced into the open. And deep down, I had a feeling those 10 days were going to change our family forever. Because while Aaron was running out of money, Rachel was putting together something far more powerful than cash. A case strong enough to stop the sale in front of everyone. For a few seconds, I just stared at my father. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller. The air felt heavier. Everything around me seemed to fade except for those 4 words. "The closing is scheduled." I slowly sat down. "What closing?" Dad looked away. The fact that he couldn't meet my eyes told me everything. "The house." My pulse started pounding. "When?" He rubbed both hands over his face. 10 days. I froze. 10 days. That was it. 10 days before they tried to sell my grandmother's home. 10 days before strangers could own the place she'd spent 50 years building memories in. 10 days before the house where I learned to ride a bike, celebrated Christmas mornings, and spent summers baking cookies with Grandma could disappear forever. "No." Dad nodded sadly. "Your mother already set everything up." I couldn't believe it. "They don't even have the legal authority." "I know." "Then why would they schedule a closing?" Dad let out a long breath. "Because they think nobody will stop them." That hit me hard. Because he was probably right. Most people wouldn't stop them. Most people wouldn't know where to start. Most people wouldn't have a lawyer. Most people wouldn't have a folder full of documents proving the truth. But Grandma wasn't most people. And neither was I. Dad stood up slowly. His shoulders looked heavier than I remembered. Like he'd been carrying something for a long time. I should have said something sooner. I didn't answer. Because honestly, I wasn't ready to forgive him. Not yet. He might not have started this. But he hadn't stopped it either. And that mattered. As he walked toward the door, he paused. "Nora." I looked up. "Be careful." The warning in his voice was real. Not dramatic. Not exaggerated. Real. Then he left. And I sat there staring at the front door long after his car disappeared. That night I called Rachel. The moment she answered, I told her everything. The closing date. The timeline. Dad's visit. All of it. When I finished, there was silence. Then Rachel spoke. Okay. That surprised me. Okay. Actually, this helps. I blinked. How does this help? Because now we know exactly where they'll be. I frowned. What do you mean? Rachel's voice became calm. Confident. The same voice she used whenever she already had a plan. We let them walk into the closing. I nearly dropped the phone. What? We let them show up. No way. Trust me. I stood up and started pacing. Rachel, they are trying to steal Grandma's house. I know. Then why would we let them get that far? Because sometimes the easiest way to stop people is to let them expose themselves. That sounded smart. Unfortunately, it also sounded terrifying. Rachel continued. The title company will have lawyers. Okay. The buyer will have representatives. Okay. The realtor will be there. I slowly started understanding. Rachel wasn't talking about a fight. She was talking about witnesses. A room full of witnesses. People who would see exactly what happened. People who couldn't pretend they didn't know. People who couldn't ignore legal documents once they were placed in front of them. For the first time, I started seeing what she saw. And honestly, it was kind of brilliant. The next morning brought another surprise. Grandma had one of her good days. The really good ones. Those days were rare now. Painfully rare. But every once in a while, the fog would lift. And when it did, pieces of the old grandma came back. That morning she was sitting at the kitchen table drinking tea. Reading the newspaper. Actually reading it. Not just staring at the pages. Reading. When I walked in, she smiled. Morning, kiddo. My chest tightened. Morning. She folded the newspaper. You look worried. I laughed softly. You always know. Of course I know. For a few seconds we just sat there. Then she surprised me. You saw the lawyer. I nearly dropped my coffee mug. What? The lawyer. Her eyes were clear. Focused. Present. You went. I stared at her. Yeah. She nodded slowly. Good. I felt chills run down my arms. Because suddenly it felt like she remembered more than anyone realized. Then she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. If they are moving fast. Her voice faded for a second. Then returned. It means they are scared. And for some reason, those words stayed with me all day. Because deep down, I knew she was right. And desperate people always make mistakes when fear starts making their decisions for them. 3 days later, Rachel called before breakfast. The second I heard her voice, I knew something had happened. Nora, we've got a problem. My stomach dropped. What now? The realtor submitted new paperwork. I stopped moving. What kind of paperwork? Rachel sounded annoyed. Which was never a good sign. A sworn affidavit. I frowned. What does that mean? It means somebody signed a legal statement claiming certain facts are true. That didn't sound terrible. Then Rachel continued. The affidavit claims Evelyn's trust was dissolved months ago. My jaw dropped. What? Exactly. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The trust wasn't dissolved. Rachel had already confirmed that. The trust was active. The property was protected. Everything had been filed properly. So why would anyone claim otherwise? The answer came instantly. Because they needed the trust gone. Without the trust, selling the house became much easier. My blood started boiling. They lied. Rachel carefully chose her words. I'm saying the affidavit directly contradicts public records. Lawyer language. But the meaning was obvious. Somebody lied. And somebody signed their name to it. Who submitted it? The realtor. Melissa Crane. The same realtor whose name appeared on every document. The same realtor helping Aaron push this sale through. The same realtor who should have verified everything herself. After hanging up, I sat alone at Grandma's kitchen table. The old maple table. The table where I learned multiplication. The table where Grandpa drank coffee every morning. The table where Grandma sat alone on her birthday waiting for family that never came. I couldn't stop staring at the scratches in the wood. Each one held a memory. A story. A piece of our family. And somebody wanted to trade all of it for money. Later that evening, Grandma and I sat on the front porch watching the sunset. The air had turned colder. Winter was getting closer. Grandma wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. For several minutes we simply watched the sky. Then she spoke. People keep looking. A chill ran through me. What people? The strangers. My pulse sped up. What strangers? She pointed toward the house. They come inside. I sat forward. When? Tuesdays. The nurse's day. Just like before. My stomach dropped. People had actually been walking through the house. Touring it. Looking around. Planning for it. While Grandma sat in another room. Thinking they belonged there. The thought made me sick. Before I could ask another question, the confusion returned. The moment disappeared. You want tea? She asked. Like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just confirmed my worst fear. That night, I received another surprise. A phone call from Aunt Linda. Mom's older sister. She never wasted time. Your mother is losing control. I sat up straighter. What happened? She and Aaron had a huge fight. Now I was interested. Apparently Aaron had shown up at my parents' house screaming. Demanding answers. Demanding solutions. Demanding money. The sale wasn't happening fast enough. The closing wasn't close enough. And according to Aunt Linda, Aaron was running out of options. Fast. How bad is it? I asked. There was a pause. Then she answered. Worse than anybody knows. My heartbeat quickened. How bad? Another pause. Then she gave me a number. A number so large it made my stomach turn. A number that explained every lie. Every secret. Every desperate move. When she finished speaking, I finally understood the truth. Aaron wasn't trying to save his business anymore. He was trying to save himself. And people who are drowning don't always care who they pull under with them. The closer we got to the closing date, the more dangerous Aaron was becoming, and that scared me more than losing the house. The closing was less than 48 hours away. 2 days. That's all we had left. I spent most of that morning in Rachel's office reviewing documents. Again. Every page. Every signature. Every filing. The trust agreement. The medical evaluations. The original power of attorney. The newer paperwork Aaron and Mom had pushed Grandma to sign. Everything. Rachel organized it carefully. If this goes the way I think it will, she said, the closing won't last 10 minutes. I wished I shared her confidence. Because my nerves were a mess. What if they try something else? Rachel didn't hesitate. They will. I blinked. You sound sure. I am. She leaned back in her chair. People who know they are right stay calm. I immediately thought about Aaron. About Mom. About all the pressure. All the lies. All the panic. None of it looked calm. Rachel smiled slightly. People who know they're wrong usually get louder. That sounded exactly right. The next afternoon, Dad showed up again. This time he looked worse than ever. Like he hadn't slept in days. He found me sitting on the back porch. For a while neither of us spoke. Then he sat beside me. I argued with your mother. I wasn't surprised. What about the house? Of course. Everything came back to the house. Dad stared across the backyard. At the oak tree. At the old swing. At the memories. This place means something. I looked at him. His voice cracked. I forgot that. For a moment, I didn't see my father. I saw a little boy who grew up here. A boy who learned to walk in this yard. A boy who once loved this house as much as Grandma did. And somehow, somewhere along the way, he lost sight of that. Dad swallowed hard. Your mother thinks I'm giving up. Aren't you? He nodded. Yeah. The answer hung in the air. Because deep down he knew. The fight was over. The truth was stronger than the lies. The documents were real. The trust was real. The evidence was real. Nothing could change that. Before leaving, he stood and looked toward the house. Then he quietly said something that surprised me. Take care of her. Not the house. Not the money. Her. And somehow that mattered. That evening, Grandma had one of her best moments in months. We sat at the kitchen table eating vanilla ice cream. The same table. The same kitchen. The same home she'd fought so hard to protect. Suddenly she looked up. Nora. Yeah? Her eyes filled with tears. Tiny ones. The kind that come from somewhere deep. You stayed. My throat tightened instantly. What? You stayed. I couldn't speak. Everyone else had gotten busy. Everyone else had excuses. Everyone else had drifted away. But I stayed. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. I'm not going anywhere. For a second, her eyes became crystal clear. And then she whispered something that nearly broke me. I knew you'd be the one. I felt tears burn behind my eyes. Because somehow, through all the confusion, she still knew. She still remembered enough. Enough to know who showed up. Enough to know who didn't. Enough to know who she could trust. A few moments later, the fog returned. The clarity disappeared. But her words stayed with me. I knew you'd be the one. The next morning, my phone rang before sunrise. I answered half asleep. Then instantly sat upright. Because the caller wasn't Rachel. It wasn't Dad. And it definitely wasn't Mom. It was Melissa Crane. The realtor. And judging by the panic in her voice, something had gone very, very wrong. Whatever she was about to tell me would change the entire closing before we even walked into the room. The phone rang at 6:12 in the morning. I was barely awake. For a second, I thought about ignoring it. Then I saw the caller ID. Melissa Crane. The realtor. My stomach immediately tightened. I answered. Hello. Melissa sounded nothing like the confident woman I'd imagined. She sounded nervous. Almost scared. Nora. Yeah. There was a pause. Then she blurted it out. I didn't know. I sat upright in bed. What? I swear, I didn't know. Now I was fully awake. What are you talking about? Another pause. Then her voice cracked. The trust. I didn't say anything. Melissa took a shaky breath. Your brother told me the trust had been dissolved. There it was. The lie? The same lie Rachel had uncovered days earlier. He said everything had been transferred back to Evelyn. I laughed bitterly. It wasn't. I know that now. The panic in her voice sounded genuine. For the first time, I realized something. Melissa wasn't the mastermind. She was just somebody who trusted the wrong people. And now she knew it. What changed? I asked. The title company started asking questions. Of course they did. Because paperwork has a funny habit of exposing lies. Especially when people start checking it. Melissa continued. They requested documents proving the trust had been dissolved. And I couldn't provide them. Because they didn't exist. There was silence. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. I'm withdrawing from the sale. I blinked. What? I'm done. She sounded exhausted. I've worked too hard to lose my license over this. Honestly, I couldn't blame her. Before hanging up, she said one last thing. Something that stayed with me. Your grandmother deserved better. Then she ended the call. For the first time in weeks, I felt hope. Real hope. The walls were finally cracking. The lies were finally falling apart. And the people behind them were starting to panic. 2 hours later, Rachel called. After hearing everything, she laughed. Actually laughed. I think Aaron just lost his realtor. Is that good? It's very good. For the first time since this nightmare began, Rachel sounded relaxed. And that made me feel better. A little. But the real battle was still coming. The closing. At exactly 1:45 that afternoon, Rachel and I walked into Capital Title Services. I carried Grandma's manila folder. The same folder she'd prepared over a year earlier. The same folder nobody thought would matter. Funny how life works. Sometimes the thing people ignore becomes the thing that saves everything. Inside the conference room sat the title officer, the buyer's representative, Aaron, Mom, Dad, and 2 attorneys representing the investment company. The second Aaron saw me walk in with Rachel, his confidence slipped. Just for a moment. But I saw it. And so did Rachel. Nobody smiled. Nobody spoke. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, the title officer cleared her throat. Before we begin, there appears to be an ownership issue. Aaron immediately jumped in. What issue? Rachel calmly opened her briefcase. Then she started laying documents on the table. The trust agreement. The property transfer. The medical evaluations. The original power of attorney. The notarized filings. One document after another. One fact after another. One truth after another. Nobody interrupted. Nobody could. Because paperwork doesn't care about feelings. Paperwork doesn't care about excuses. Paperwork only cares about facts. The title officer reviewed everything carefully. Then she looked directly at Aaron. This property belongs to the Evelyn Bennett Family Trust. The room went silent. Aaron's face turned pale. Mom looked like she couldn't breathe. The buyer's attorneys immediately started reviewing the documents themselves. A minute later, one of them closed his folder. Then another. Neither looked happy. Finally, the title officer sat back in her chair. Then she said 5 words that ended everything. I cannot authorize this closing. Silence. Complete silence. Months of planning. Months of pressure. Months of lies. Destroyed in less than 10 minutes. Aaron exploded. You don't understand. The title officer didn't even blink. No, Mr. Bennett. I understand perfectly. My company needs this deal. That is not relevant. My mother agreed. Your mother doesn't own the property. Every answer was another wall. Every wall made Aaron more desperate. Then the buyer's lead attorney stood up. His expression was ice cold. He looked directly at Aaron. We'll be reviewing our options regarding misrepresentation. The room froze. Even Aaron stopped talking. Because everybody knew exactly what that meant. The deal wasn't just dead. There could be consequences. Real consequences. The buyers left. The attorneys left. The title officer ended the meeting. And just like that, it was over. 3 months later, Aaron's development company filed for bankruptcy. The debts were too large. The projects collapsed. The investors walked away. For the first time in his life, nobody could rescue him. Mom took it hard. Really hard. The truth eventually spread through the family. Not because I told anyone. Because people talk. And secrets never stay buried forever. Dad apologized. More than once. Not with speeches. Not with excuses. With actions. He started visiting Grandma every week. Sometimes twice. And honestly, that mattered more than words ever could. As for me, the court approved my role as trustee and legal guardian for Grandma's affairs. Exactly the way she wanted. Exactly the way she planned. Exactly the way she'd written it. The house stayed in the family trust. Safe. Protected. Untouched. Just as she intended. 6 months later, I sat beside Grandma on the front porch. The hydrangeas were blooming again. The evening sun painted the yard gold. For one beautiful moment, the fog lifted. She looked at me. Really looked at me. Then smiled. Is the house okay? I squeezed her hand. The same hand that had held mine when I was little. The same hand that had signed that folder. The same hand that had protected everything she loved. Yeah, Grandma. Her smile widened. Then she whispered 3 words before drifting back to sleep. I knew that. And sitting there beside her, I realized something I'll never forget. Some people think strength is about being loud. They are wrong. Sometimes strength is an 80-year-old woman who saw the storm coming before everyone else. Sometimes strength is refusing to walk away when things get hard. And sometimes, it's a simple manila folder that reminds a family that love should never have a price tag. The end.